The day my children found out I had given away almost everything I owned, the silence in the solicitor's office was so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. My eldest son stared at me as if I'd betrayed him. My daughter burst into tears. My youngest called me cruel. None of them asked the one question that mattered. Dad, why? Instead, they all wanted to know one thing. How much is left for us? That was the moment I knew I'd made the right decision. My name is Arthur, and I'm 71 years old. I spent 43 years building a construction company from the ground up. I wasn't born rich. My father worked in a factory, and my mother cleaned houses. They taught me that every pound had to be earned. I worked 16-hour days, missed holidays, skipped birthdays, and sacrificed everything to make sure my family never struggled the way I had. My wife, Helen, stood beside me through every difficult year. She believed in me when nobody else did. When she passed away from cancer 6 years ago, something inside me broke. I thought my children would help fill the emptiness. Instead, they only filled my phone with requests for money. My eldest son, Daniel, was 45, charming, confident, and allergic to hard work. Dad, business is slow. Can you lend me $20,000? I'll pay you back. He never did. My daughter, Lisa, loved expensive holidays more than paying her bills. Dad, the children deserve Disneyland. So did paying her mortgage. Then there was my youngest, Ryan. He changed careers every 6 months because every boss was impossible. Every family dinner became the same conversation. Dad, can you help just this once? This is the last time. You know family comes first. Family. They loved that word whenever they wanted something. I stopped counting after the first £500,000. Every loan became a gift. Every promise disappeared. Whenever I tried to say no, my children became experts at making me feel guilty. After Helen died, they visited more often. At first, I thought they were worried about me. I couldn't have been more wrong. One Sunday, Daniel showed up carrying a bottle of wine. Dad, thought I'd spend some quality time with you. We sat in the garden for 10 minutes before he cleared his throat. So, I found this incredible investment. I smiled bitterly. There it is. What? The real reason you're here. His smile vanished. Come on, Dad. Don't be like that. I thought you came to see your father. I did. And the investment? It's just, while I'm here. Always while I'm here. Lisa wasn't any different. She arrived with flowers every Mother's Day. Not Father's Day. Mother's Day. Because she'd buy one bouquet and split it between her late mother's grave and me. Efficient. Cheap. Predictable. Dad, she said one afternoon, my car's making strange noises. Have you taken it to a mechanic? They said it'll cost $4,000. So? She looked offended. I thought you'd help. Why? She blinked. Because you're my father. I looked her straight in the eyes. And when was the last time you asked how I was feeling? She had no answer. Ryan was the worst. He didn't even pretend. He'd walk into my house and ask, got any cash? Not hello. Not how are you. Cash. One Christmas, I decided to test something. Instead of hosting dinner, I told everyone I was feeling tired and wanted a quiet holiday. None of them came. Not one. No calls. No surprise visit. Nothing. I spent Christmas Day eating leftovers alone. The only person who knocked on my door was my neighbor, Emily. She was 28, worked as a nurse, and had moved in next door 2 years earlier. I made too much turkey, she smiled. I don't believe that. I also made too much pie. Still don't believe you. She laughed. Fine. I knew you'd be alone. I felt embarrassed. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She stayed for 3 hours. We talked about books, old films, and my late wife. Not once did she ask about money. Not once. After that Christmas, Emily started checking on me every few days. Sometimes she'd bring soup. Sometimes she'd ask if I needed shopping. Sometimes we'd simply drink tea. One rainy afternoon, she noticed me struggling to carry groceries. Arthur, before I could answer, she'd already grabbed the heavier bags. I've got them. You'll hurt your back. I'm a nurse. So, I lift patients bigger than you every day. We both laughed. She became the daughter I never expected, not because she tried to replace my own children, but because she cared without expecting anything back. One evening I asked, Why are you always helping me? She looked confused. Because you're kind. That's it. Isn't that enough? I nearly cried. Months passed. My own children visited less and less. Unless they needed money. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Dad, Daniel said excitedly. We've got wonderful news. What is it? We're all coming over this Sunday. All 3 children. Together. That had never happened. I cleaned the house. Cooked lunch. Even baked Helen's favorite apple pie. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe. Maybe they finally wanted to spend time with me. Maybe they missed me. Maybe this was what family was supposed to feel like. Sunday arrived. All 3 walked in smiling. Ryan hugged me. Lisa complimented the house. Daniel poured drinks. It felt strange. Too perfect. After lunch, Daniel cleared his throat. Dad. There it was. We've been talking. Should I be worried? Lisa reached across the table. We're only thinking about what's best for you. My stomach tightened. Ryan slid a glossy brochure across the table. I looked down. Luxury retirement living. I slowly looked back at them. What is this? Daniel smiled. We think it's time you moved into a retirement community. I live perfectly well here. Lisa forced a smile. It would be safer. Ryan added. And honestly, this house is too much for one person. I folded my hands. So that's what this is about. Daniel hesitated. No. Then explain. He exchanged nervous glances with his brother and sister. Finally, he spoke. If you sold this house now, we'd all have enough for deposits on larger homes. The room fell silent. I stared at my own children. They weren't worried about me. They wanted my house. They wanted my money. And they wanted it while I was still alive. I quietly asked one question. If I refuse? Daniel's smile disappeared. He leaned forward and said words I'll never forget. Then don't expect us to keep wasting our weekends visiting you. Daniel's words hung in the air like a slap across my face. Then don't expect us to keep wasting our weekends visiting you. Nobody corrected him. Nobody looked ashamed. Lisa simply lowered her eyes, while Ryan crossed his arms as if Daniel had only said what they had all been thinking. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then I quietly asked, So, the only reason you're here is because you want my house? Daniel sighed dramatically. Dad, why do you always make everything sound so ugly? I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because I finally understood the truth. The ugly part isn't how it sounds, Daniel. The ugly part is that it's true. Lisa suddenly reached for my hand. Dad, please don't be upset. We're thinking about your future. My future? Yes. Imagine living somewhere with nurses, activities, friends your own age. I already have friends. Ryan shrugged. You'd be happier? No. I replied calmly. You'd be richer. None of them denied it. That silence told me everything. After they left, I sat alone in Helen's favorite chair for hours. I looked around the house we had built together. Every wall held memories. The marks where the children's heights had been measured. The old piano Helen loved. The garden where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. To my children, it wasn't a home anymore. It was an asset waiting to be sold. The next morning, I called my solicitor. I'd like to update my will. Certainly, Arthur. Has something changed? Everything. Over the following weeks, I made decisions that gave me peace for the first time in years. I sold my construction company to the managers who had helped me build it. I created scholarships for apprentices who couldn't afford training. I donated a large amount to the local cancer hospice where Helen had spent her final days. Then I established a trust that would provide funding for elderly people who had no family to care for them. Finally, I made one last decision. The house would not go to my children. Neither would most of my fortune. Instead, I left the home to Emily. Not because she had ever asked, because she never had. When my solicitor looked surprised, I smiled. She's the only person who ever visited simply because she cared whether I was lonely. Months passed. I never mentioned the changes to anyone. Meanwhile, my children became strangely attentive again. Daniel suddenly wanted weekly lunches. Lisa called every Tuesday. Ryan even offered to mow my lawn. It almost looked convincing, until the requests started again. Dad, could you help with a small investment? Dad, we're behind on the mortgage. Dad, just one more loan. Every single time I smiled and answered, no. Their kindness disappeared a little more with every refusal. Then one afternoon, Emily knocked on my door looking worried. Arthur, can I ask you something? Of course. My landlord is selling the flat. I'm sorry. I've been looking everywhere, but everything is so expensive. She tried to smile. I'll figure something out. She wasn't asking me for money. She wasn't hinting. She was simply sharing what was happening in her life. I invited her in for tea. As we talked, I realized something. For years, I'd been trying to buy my children's love. Yet the person who genuinely cared about me never asked for a single penny. Several months later, my health began to decline. Nothing dramatic. Just age catching up with me. The doctor suggested I think about assisted living in the future. This time it was my decision, not my children's. Emily drove me to appointments. She collected prescriptions. Sometimes she'd simply sit with me while we watched old films Helen and I had loved. One evening I told her, "You've done more for me in 3 years than my own children have done in 20. She looked uncomfortable. You don't owe me anything. I know. Then please don't ever feel like you have to repay me. I smiled to myself. She had no idea. A year later, I invited my children to the solicitor's office. The moment they arrived, I could almost see the excitement in their faces. Daniel whispered to Ryan, "This is it." Lisa smiled nervously. The solicitor began reading my updated estate plan. As the donations to charities were announced, Daniel frowned. When the scholarships were mentioned, Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Then came the house. I leave my family home to Emily Carter. Daniel shot to his feet. What? Lisa's face turned white. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. Who the hell is Emily? The solicitor continued. The remainder of Mr. Arthur's estate has been distributed among charitable trusts and community foundations. Daniel interrupted again. This has to be a joke. The solicitor calmly handed him a copy. It is legally binding. Daniel turned to me. You gave everything away? No. I gave it to people who actually valued me. Lisa burst into tears. Dad, were your children? I nodded. Yes. So how could you do this? I looked at each of them. When your mother died, I spent 6 Christmases hoping one of you would stay for dinner. Silence. I spent birthdays alone. More silence. I waited for phone calls that never came. Daniel looked away. The only time any of you remembered I existed was when your bank accounts were empty. Nobody argued. Because nobody could. I slowly stood. You treated me like a walking cash machine. Ryan finally exploded. We're family. No, I replied quietly. Family doesn't measure love in bank transfers. The receptionist outside had heard the shouting. Several clients waiting in the office looked over. For the first time in their lives, my children couldn't hide behind excuses. Everyone saw them exactly as they were. Daniel lowered his head. Lisa quietly sobbed. Ryan stormed out without another word. A week later, all 3 appeared at my house. Not demanding, not shouting, begging. Dad, we were wrong. We made mistakes. We can change. I believed they regretted something, but it wasn't losing me. It was losing the inheritance. I opened the door a little wider. I forgive you. Hope appeared on their faces. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Their smiles disappeared. I hope one day you become the kind of people your mother believed you could be. Then I gently closed the door. For the first time in years, I didn't cry after they left. Months later, Emily moved into the house. Not as a reward, as family. She insisted on paying every household bill she could. She filled the home with laughter again. She planted new flowers beside the roses Helen had loved. Sometimes we'd sit in the garden with tea, watching the sunset. I realized something that changed my life forever. Real family isn't always connected by blood. Sometimes it's the person who stays when they have nothing to gain. As for my children, word spread through relatives about what had happened. The same people who once praised them for being successful now quietly questioned why their own father had trusted a neighbor more than his children. It became a lesson nobody in the family forgot. As for me, I left this world knowing my life's work would help people who truly needed it. My wife's memory would live on through the hospice that cared for others, and the home we built together would remain filled with kindness instead of greed. In the end, I didn't lose my family. I simply discovered who never really was my family to begin with.